30, so we'll call the meeting to order. It looks like we need to do roll calls, so let's see, should we start at Brian's end? Do a
Brian Lundgren here. Jonathan Mix here.
Laura Warfield here.
Ricky Dyson here.
Ruth Ann Morris here.
Yeah, Sutherland here.
I was just gonna say, Zan.
Oh, there she is. There she is.
I went to the store for bananas.
We were just doing the roll call.
Oh, okay, I'm here. Ann Ellis is here. Okay, she's here.
Okay.
She made it.
Good. And let's see, visitors, do we have one visitor? And then I guess the next thing that we do is we want to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Do you want to hear from the visitor?
We want to hear from the visitor first. Okay,
Yes.
okay, Brian moved,
I'll second that.
Ann will second. All those in, or is there any discussion or anything like that with the minutes? before
No,
we
I
approve
figured
it?
it out. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so all those in favor?
I.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes. And it looks like the next thing we have on the agenda is the work session of the residential code and House Bill 3395 update.
But you need to remember our input. Did she know?
I think she already said
She didn't
She's not
have any,
visiting.
she didn't have anything she wanted to say.
Oh, okay.
I think she's just.
She's just here. Just here.
watching. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good.
okay,
You turn it on. Yeah.
I turn it over to Justin now, yep.
Right, thank you. So this meeting is a continuation of kind of where we were with our last meeting. The last meeting, we kind of the code audit that's in the packet. We went through the code audit, so that looked at the sections, the current code language, and then the proposed language. And then now kind of what we're doing is we're taking that code audit, what we discussed, and putting that language actually into the code to see what that would look like in terms of text changes in the code. So a lot of what you're seeing is pretty similar. And then we'll dive into a few areas where there were some questions about what that looks like moving forward in terms of the code audit. So the memo goes through some of the history and then outlines the definitions again, but I kind of want to jump right into the language in the code, and that starts the Toledo Municipal Code Title 17 zoning. That page in your packet is where I'll be starting. And I don't want to go through every single definition again, because we went through most of these at the last meeting. This is just kind of showing where a definition might have existed, but we've updated the definition so you can see where it's the track change. It shows it removed and then added. So, and a lot of this is trying to update it to match what the state language is for definitions. So trying to clean up some of those definitions. One new definition, which wasn't in the packet, and just before the meeting I was reviewing, but we have residential care facility and we also have residential care home or group home. We didn't have a new definition in your packet for residential care facility, but I would propose, I was looking through some language before the meeting.
What page are you on?
In the ours, so page 11,
There.
yeah. At the bottom, it outlines the current definition of residential care facility, the proposed new language, which I pulled from the new state language, but that it would be residential care facility means any private or public institution or facility maintained and operated for the care, boarding, housing.
Awesome. I
Yeah,
still can't figure out what page you're on.
yeah,
Oh, right here.
Page-
Oh, this
Big
one
guy.
right here, right here.
Ricky,
page
big one,
11,
Oh, big one.
yeah,
Okay.
page 11.
sorry. It. So I will, means any private or public institution or facility maintained and operated for care, boarding, housing, training, or rehabilitation of 6 or more physically, mentally, or socially handicapped or delinquent elderly or drug or alcohol dependent persons in 1 or more buildings on contiguous properties. So that's matching the state definition, and it's relatively similar to the previous definition where we actually did reference the ORS as well, that definition. But since we are updating residential care home, I wanted to go back and also update the residential care facility language as well.
It looks like perhaps the only difference is the number of people. Is that basically the difference?
Yeah,
between the two?
It did change from, it was 6 as the minimum, because kind of the difference is a home is 5 or less.
Right.
So those are smaller facilities, maybe within
5 or less.
in a home, and a facility is typically larger, and that would be 6 plus. And then there are also, I mean, we have our zoning restrictions, but then there's also, you need to meet the Department of Human Resources requirements in order to open up a facility as well. So they have staffing requirements in terms of, which I don't know the details of, but in terms of number of people that would need to be there in terms of managing the home or facility. So that's the only new definition that was being proposed. Were there any from our last conversation, were there any questions on any of the other definitions? Again, they generally match what we walked through in the code audit document last month. In our focus, there's a lot of other definitions in here, but our focus was housing related definitions is what we're trying to update with this code update.
I got confused on page 38 about the religiously owned affordable housing and affordable housing land use.
Yeah, I'll get,
Oh, you're getting to, I'm sorry.
yeah, just,
Okay.
sorry, just,
I didn't know if we were through.
just the definition section, so up to page 14. If there are any of those definitions that didn't make sense, that I could go into detail. Oh, actually, I think lot of record, that definition is new on page 7. So this is something that we previously didn't define in our code, but I think it's important to define, but a lot of record, a lot shown as part of a recorded subdivision or approved partition map, or any parcel of land described by meets and bounds in a recorded deed, record of survey, or other appropriate document recorded in the office of the county recorder prior to the adoption of the original partition and subdivision ordinance. So what we're trying to outline here is, so before we had a partition and subdivision ordinance, how properties were created were meets and bounds on deed documents or survey documents. So prior to our subdivision ordinance and partition ordinance, that's how properties were created. But after, you needed to go through an official partition process to actually divide your land, and that's our partition and subdivision chapter that we have. So this is just clearly outlining the definition of what a lot of record is. So when we're doing deed research on a property, we like to check to make sure it is a legal lot prior to development occurring. And one thing I did want to note, we have a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And that's how we're able to do this code work, is it's funded through that grant. And they've been a little slow to respond right now, but we're trying to get additional comments from DLCD in terms of if we missed anything. So if they have comments, we'll come back with those to the Planning Commission and update on any comments we receive and any other updates that we need to make for at least this portion of our code updates that we're working on. I'll move on to page 15. One thing we talked about a little bit was what do we name the RS zone, since we're updating our definitions and calling it single unit detached instead of single family. So one thing that came up as an idea was to keep it RS, but do standard residential. So we'd have our standard residential and then our general residential zone. And that way on our zoning map, and also for developers that know our code in terms of RS and RG, it would be easier for them to understand moving forward. That's not functionally changing the zone, but it's just kind of changing how we've named the zone. So that would be on the map, all of the yellow area on our zoning map is the RS area. You can kind of think of the RG or center of town, and RS more the fringes of town typically. We didn't come to a conclusion at the last meeting on the name, and this came up after the meeting. We were kind of throwing ideas back and forth, but Arlene gets credit for the name, if this is what we go with, but we were kind of like trying to come up with something in terms of a name.
So I think it sounds fine.
Yeah.
It makes
Sounds
sense.
good, yes,
Yeah.
logical.
General standard.
And in the next section, goes to page 16. But these are kind of clarifying statements that we make in the code, and we're proposing to add a new note. So any reference to single family residential shall be considered standard residential. So we're going to go through the code and try and update every place from single to standard, but just to make it clear if there's something that we miss, that it is actually just referring to the standard residential zone. And then in chapter 1708, kind of going through these updates, you'll kind of see that the standard residential, and then updating the family, the residential or unit in the purpose statement, and then dwelling single unit detached as an outright permitted use. So functionally, that'll be the same in terms of single unit homes on a residential lot. The RS are outright permitted still, and so the zone itself is not changing. We've just updated the definition, so we need to update the uses permitted section. And in conditional uses permitted, we're proposing to remove the manufactured dwellings that do not meet the minimum standard set in section 1708.
How are you gonna do that?
How to remove that?
You're gonna remove them.
Yeah.
So we're removing this definition, but manufactured homes up in the uses permitted are still allowed. Under 020 uses permitted, C, manufactured dwellings are still outright permitted in the standard residential zone. But here we had this weird carve out that was actually more so applicable to our previous code standards, where we actually had a dwelling size limitation, so 1,000 square feet, but we removed that. And then the only basically for manufactured homes, if they meet the standards for building code for placement, they're allowed. So there's no reason to have a separate carve out there because all manufactured homes would be outright permitted, so we don't need a conditional use option. So it's again, trying to where a conditional use can take 2 to 3 months to go through planning commission, outright permitted use. Typically, staff can review that in a couple weeks, and then the building department has their review, but it can move a lot faster if it's outright permitted use. So it's kind of, and right now that extra subsection F in the conditional uses permitted, it's unnecessary to have that extra language. And then in H, just updating it to match our definitions, dwelling unit multiple. And then under subsection K, very similar to the reasoning for the manufactured home language being removed, but there's no reason why a single unit detached home shouldn't be able to meet the standards as an outright permitted use. And kind of specifically for single family homes, I'm gonna jump a little bit, but on page 18 and 19, you can see a lot of area that was removed, but we had specific design feature standards that were where you had to meet three of the following. And these typically are pretty easy to meet in terms of design standards, but we're trying to get away from regulating the specifics and be more clear and objective when we're reviewing housing development, not hold up because you don't have window shutters or dormers or recessed entries, but trying to simplify the process. Again, most homes already have a lot of these anyway, in terms
Well, I
of.
know like the dormers and stuff like that. I know like Depot Bay has that standard. Where you have to have the dormers. Cause they want it to look like,
They want it cute.
yeah, cottages or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
My
You'll see,
house is still waiting for the outside 4-inch window trim. It's got it on the inside.
and then on page 18, for the sign section, under subsection C, we're adding, so originally that section for a 6 square foot sign was only for home occupations, but we're adding, make it clear for short-term rentals. Again, not many in Toledo at this point, but kind of making it clear that if you have a short-term rental, you can have a small sign that says this person's residence or whatever the name of your Airbnb is. And then subsection D is allowing for one non-illuminated sign to not exceed 24 square feet in conjunction with the multi. That's a typo because it should be say multi-unit, not family, to match the definition. I'll make that correction or subdivision. So right now we don't carve out to allow signage. So if a new subdivision goes in, typically there's a sign. Or an apartment goes in, there's usually a sign that says Riverside Apartments or whatever the name of the apartments are. So making that clear and then having a clear and objective size requirement. So it can't be a massive sign, but it's limited to the 24 square feet. In the setback requirement, one thing that's come up multiple times when we're reviewing permits are ADA ramps in the front yard setback. So we want to make it clear that ramps to comply with the ramps in compliance with ADA may encroach into the front yard setback.
So in other words, it can be less than 15 feet
Oh yeah, only the
by adding the ADA.
Mhm. The front of the home would still need to be 15 feet setback, but if
But
the ramp
can.
could be in that front yard 15 feet.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah,
So on the one before, where you said you're gonna change it to multi-unit dwelling,
yeah,
but you're gonna do multi-unit dwelling unit?
it'll be dwelling we'll just do within dwelling unit, multiple or subdivision, which so it'll match the definition. Yeah. But no, good question. Any questions, other questions so far? Then kind of hidden, as we've deleted subsection A there on page 19. There's number 2 there, so it says all single-family dwellings will meet the minimum requirements for energy efficiency. So this is actually duplicative of what the building code and building department is going to review, so there's no reason to have this in there when the energy efficiency standards are being checked at the building level from, at this time, our building official at the county level. So it's not that these standards are going away for energy efficiency, it's just that we're being duplicative with our standards.
So are you still making notes like where the single family dwelling and all that? Like number 5 here.
Yeah, and that's anywhere you
Could be changed.
see that note for me, thank you. That's,
It's another one down at the bottom, D, accessory building.
and I will go through and make,
Is it digitalized where you can just like search the word and it'll find? all-
yeah, I'll be able to search it and go through.
That's good.
I can imagine having. It would be a thing.
Go through my head. Yeah. If we missed one, that's why we had that earlier subsection just in case, so we will. I'll search to make it, that we capture, if not all, almost all references. And now I'm remembering, Arlene, in section 4, the erosion, did we talk about adding gutters there?
Yeah, so moving the gutter
Yeah.
and eaves to the erosion control.
The one note, we remove all those standards for single unit and manufactured dwellings. But one thing in subsection 4 there, you have erosion control plans. So we would propose adding some language about moving those gutters into that section to ensure, as every time a dwelling comes in, our public works department's looking at the gutters and the drainage proposal. Typically, it'll just be like there's gutters and then it's draining towards the street, but making sure that it's not draining directly onto the adjacent property, but making sure you have gutters as part of the development, and that's less kind of a appeal thing, but a practical, you need to have erosion control plan. So we'd add a sentence about gutters to subsection 4(8).
We don't care if you have bay windows, but. have gutters.
That would be the change. Still have no bay windows, but
Well, gutters make sense. But you have to have gutters around your bay window.
the next kind of text edits are on page 22, so we get into the general residential zone. Less updates in this section, but again, kind of focusing on matching our definitions. And then a lot of it, like the signs and the ADA ramps, matches what was proposed in the RS zone. So I'll do a similar search as well to make sure that I capture anywhere, those definitions still need to be updated, so doing a search for family. Any questions on the RG edits there? In the commercial zone, not a lot here, so again, the commercial zone on here, it's the kind of the pink area. A lot of it's on Business Highway 20 or on Main Street, but then there's some other scattered commercial around town as well. In general, the focus of this zone is for commercial uses, not residential, but we do currently allow under uses permitted outright subsection K, and this is page 26, one live work accessory dwelling unit that meets the applicable code requirements. So that's kind of the option for outright permitted residential is if you had the front of your building was commercial and then you had a back area that was residential. And there's still the building code requirements to convert if it is a historically commercial building. You have to go through the building code requirements to convert that area to residential. But that's kind of one place where you might see some units where there's residential. And then we do allow conditional uses. And actually, it's a good catch. Under conditional uses, subsection F, that will now have to, instead of multifamily, update to match the definition again, dwelling unit multiple. So I'll go through and recheck to make sure we capture all those. So a good example of this is the quadplex that Planning Commission approved on Beach Street a few years ago now that's constructed, but that was in the commercial zone, but they went through a conditional use process to build multi-unit. In that case, it was a quadplex. And then one thing we started the discussion on last time were the setback requirements in terms of reducing them. Right now in the commercial zone, it has a pretty large front yard setback standard of 25 feet for the front yard. So that the proposal here, and we can update this language based on what Planning Commission sees fit. But it would be 20 feet for properties adjacent to Business Highway 20 and a minimum of 15 feet for all other streets. Dwelling unit multiple approved through a conditional use may propose reduced setback. So if there is a case, again, where something like that quadplex was coming in, going through the conditional use process, the developer could propose to be closer. Planning Commission would still have to review it and approve it to make sure there were no issues with sight lines for cars or anything, but there's some potential for less setbacks there. But so anywhere Business Highway 20, the setback's larger because there's typically more traffic along Business Highway 20, but other streets up here, up say A Street a little bit in the commercial area, and that would only be 15 feet for the front yard setback, so less. Any questions on the setbacks? And we have a couple of zones in here which we're not proposing to touch because they're not, they are residential zones, but are industrial and light industrial zones, and then water dependent. So I'm kind of skipping through those to page 38. And And 38 is would be a new section. Religious owned affordable housing and affordable housing land use. So this section comes out of an ORS, so we're trying here to mimic the language from the ORS. So, and I'll kind of read through this and can answer questions. But the purpose of this section is to enhance affordable housing opportunities in Toledo, consistent with the Toledo comp plan. In addition, open opportunities for land not currently zoned residentially for affordable housing developments consistent with ORS 197A 445 and this chapter. So again, trying to meet the standards in that ORS. But Ann, you have a question?
Maybe it's me, but under application requirements, the parcel proposed for affordable housing development shall, and then it says that on the prop cannot be adequately served by water, sewer, storm, and will not be. Does not contain, I'm not sure if that's allowed or not. I mean,
Yeah,
that it confuses me, that wording.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
The
Because then it says the site
Yeah.
when developed.
and the purpose,
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
yeah, and I can rework this language. And
It needs to be redone.
I found a better example. It took me a while to find a good example from a city, but I think I found a better one. But the purpose of that application requirements there is actually for certain properties, even if they are commercially zoned and would have affordable, but they're in the floodplain or they have 25% slopes, or they're in a hazardous land area, or they can't be served by water and sewer, then they don't get that carve out. So it's making sure you don't want to put affordable housing in the floodplain or on a steep sloped area. And there's actually, with a lot of the funding that nonprofits get, there's language in there to be avoiding floodplain areas. But that's, I think I agree that it's needs
Yeah,
to
because
be.
that shall, and then it goes into A, B, C, D, it just.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
He's got a better one.
I know, thank you for pointing that out, because this is one where right before the meeting, I was trying to go through and find a better example, because I didn't love how it was
Yeah.
set up at this point, but essentially the goal of this carve out in section would be that for your commercially or public use lots, it opens up the ability to build affordable housing on those lots without having to go through additional steps or having the zoning prevent.
Yeah, that seems like it until you
Yeah.
get to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
But yeah, you wouldn't want to kind of, build that affordable housing on certain areas. And this is matching the ORS language, but I think have it copied in and that's my fault for rushing through that section and trying to get this all put together. But this is kind of one that'll come back and it'll look a little reworked, but I think overall the purpose is to meet the ORS and have this carve out for affordable housing. Maybe where I want to spend the bulk of our meeting is on page 41. We started talking about this a little bit in our meeting last month. But this would be creating a commercial residential overlay is the proposal. So right now, you have the map of the main street overlay. We currently have a main street overlay and that's on page 39. That's our main street overlay. And Arlene will pull up the map. A lot of the properties are directly on Main Street, and then there's a few properties just off of Main Street. We'll share it up on the screen in a second. But our Main Street overlay, kind of the purpose of that section is it's saving along Main Street, those bottom floor areas for commercial. But it outlines the opportunity to have permitted upper floor or basement dwelling units. Or if you're not abutting Main Street, it's even more flexible for residential development. So this is our current overlay that we already have. So you can kind of see it's along Main Street and then sometimes some parcels a little off of Main Street. And then any questions on our current Main Street overlay? And
All the green is the main.
yeah, all the green is the
Yeah.
Main Street overlay. So if you had, as an example, if you were a parcel like directly, so the old hotel is an example, you're on Main Street directly abutting it. So the bottom floor has to keep commercial, but you can have upper floor residential units still meeting the building code requirements. So that if it's not historically been residential, there's a process where you have to go through building code to make sure there's clear ingress egress and you meet all fire requirements. So there's kind of a process for the conversion. If you're not abutting Main Street, so you're say this parcel here, that actually will allow for you to have bottom floor residential units as well. And that was the code update that we did in the previous work we did. So we want to maintain that Main Street commercial feel, but if you're just off of Main Street, having the potential for like a triplex or quadplex, so a little bit denser, but then a single unit. But being close to services, so being able to walk to services. But I wanted to kind of go back to the Main Street overlay and then kind of talk through the proposed commercial, the residential commercial overlay. Are there any questions on the Main Street overlay? So what we talked about a little bit, and planning commission members wanted to bring it back to talk through in more detail with the commercial residential overlay. And again, the code standards here are just really baseline at this point to start the conversation. The edge of the Main Street overlay actually includes these three parcels here. And then you have Beach Street and then Business Highway 20. And in this area, we have the here is where that quadplex was approved through a conditional use process. And a lot of these lots currently are residential and historically have been residential, but it's zoned commercial there. The thought process at the time when the code was adopted was probably that in the future, there might be additional commercial development in town, and these might be redeveloped. But they haven't been over time. So with the overlay, this would create more flexibility for residential, but you would still be in the commercial zone. So there's also still opportunity to have a commercial business in these areas. One thing I did want to note, it does not, it's actually currently for sale right on Business Highway 20, but it is an office that's here. I think it was a tax office? Yeah, that was here. The building's for sale now, but that's not in the overlay. It's just outside. So the east of Beach is outside. So those, and you have another kind of complex of a couple businesses just to the north, and those are also not in the overlay, because those I think have historically been commercial. So it's kind of focusing on the area right now as it's shown that's it historically been zoned commercial, but been on the ground residential. And one thing that we do run into is oftentimes if any homes go for sale in this area, there's some challenges with the reassurance to redevelop on it as a single family, because we have our non-conforming chapter, which I'll get into a little bit more. But if, say, under the current code, you would only have a certain amount of, you'd have to go through a conditional or a variance process to rebuild. And it would create some challenges, but this would make it easier to rebuild moving forward. Because I don't foresee, since it's historically been residential, a massive change moving forward, but it still would allow for that opportunity for commercial in that area. So it's, the goal here would be creating more flexibility. And it would be a small area in town. It could be expanded to other areas in town, but this kind of in our initial conversations, this kind of made the most sense. It's adjacent. We don't want to overlap the Main Street overlay. And a lot of the other commercial lots, the pink, are along Business Highway 20, and maybe it still makes sense to maintain those as commercial, but there is still the carve out option for multi-unit. If someone did want to go through that process.
Does that go as far south as the Elks?
No,
What's on the other side?
Are they over here?
Well, I'm looking at, where the Business Highway 20 is, and up on the top is probably where the PUD building
What
was.
is that street?
The triangle, the triangle.
Yeah, maybe that up there.
Yeah.
But you know how you go down, used to be when I was growing up, it's now a house, but it was the library. Right off the highway there, it was the library before they built the library. And then, you go down a little farther where the Episcopal Church is. Is that kind of what I'm picturing? Is
No.
that street
Wrong side.
is going
That's the
south of
historic
that?
You're on the downhill side, you're
Very
on the uphill side.
Well, and I saw this is the uphill side, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't this the downhill side there?
Back to the other one, I'll show her where the Elks is. Okay, you see where the triangle tip is? It's the street down from the PUD. That street off to the left and down. That road.
That
goes all the way
street
to
is
left
the-
next to the
Where
Elks.
those two
So does that, just so I'm getting a visual, does that cover where the chamber office is now then?
the chamber would be outside.
Outside of that, okay.
Just outside.
So that is total residential there where that overlay is.
Yeah, on the south side of Business Highway 20, I think there's three homes there. And then on the north side, it's pretty much all either single unit or there's the quadplex that's in there that now was recently developed. And then is there any?
This was the older
church. Up there a little.
Oh, yeah, the church.
Yeah, there, yeah.
One of those big lots. Right.
Right there.
Yeah, because you have the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wait, the PUD lot is right there.
This one.
yeah.
The PUD.
So the PU.
So, but the Elks is still farther down.
Yeah.
The Elks is gonna be down here.
Like 2 blocks
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, we're just trying to visualize where that kind of south of the highway covered, but it really does just cover residential. Okay.
Do you have the aerial?
Okay.
We'll see if we can pull up an aerial.
Because I'm trying to guess. Is
I
that?
looked at it, I got confused with the.
Yeah. Because this is Alder Street, right? This one right here.
This is 20.
Isn't that the street that then leads to
20's
the
the
Elks?
coup.
20 is at the gray loopy. thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But then this right from here,
this is
isn't that what
20.
goes down into the Elks?
That's Main Street, yeah.
yeah, if you keep
I get
going all the way.
Okay.
Perfect. So here's the aerial. We capture. Couple, right now as the boundary drawn, couple of these, the single unit homes here. And then the beach west, so these current commercial buildings would not be a part of it, so it'd be beach west. Then here's the quadplex that was developed, and then a lot of, yeah, just homes in this area, and then we capture up here, there's a two homes, I think, on the west side of Alder. That's what would be, as the boundary is currently drawn, what would be included. And we would. I think the church is also included. I believe.
The church is
Is that one residential?
residential.
Okay, that's the cutoff,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's-
that's here.
These 2 or 3 houses.
So as an example. If this was adopted and this was still a vacant lot. And then the developer came in. It would be an outright permitted use there instead of having to go through the additional conditional use process. So if someone, I guess, this is an example of an area where there's maybe some more space, but if this got partitioned off and someone wanted to build here, that might be an example of where there could be, or here, this vacant lot's been for sale for a little bit too, that's kind of fronting business highway 22. So those, a lot of it's been built out and probably won't change for a really long time, but there are some areas where there's some vacant area. And the other, so any thoughts on the boundary?
So it's really not a problem to keep that commercial, then, if we know the majority of it there is residential. I mean, it's just like you said, it just means a trip to the planning commission to get that fixed, or
Current, yeah, right now as it's structured with commercial. We'll often get requests for letters on the process for redeveloping, and it's hard to provide the full assurance that you can redevelop it, because if, say, one of those homes got removed by the previous owner, and then they resold that lot, and then a new owner comes in and wants to rebuild. Now you're under the commercial standards, you have a vacant lot and you can't rebuild that single unit. But if we create this overlay, we're now making it flexible to be able to more streamlined to rebuild.
well, because that vacant lot there on the corner where it has the little building, you know, throughout the years, it's been a dog groomer, it's been a barber, and
Mhm.
somebody's lived in it. I mean, you know, so it's kind of
And that,
back and forth.
that's a weird one. Technically, that one has always carried a business license. There might have been some lapses in there, but whoever is living in that small unit, there should have been a business license associated with it at all times. So that's something that we've been tracking. So it could be small online businesses, barber, but there's, I think there's a car lot there once.
Yeah,
and
you're right, there was a car lot,
So
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
but that's a live work unit.
Okay.
Is how that one was approved. It's sometimes hard to track, but it should be maintaining a business license over time, and that one's been pretty good about always having a business license associated with it over time.
I'm not sure, but I think possibly when they did that, I'm blanking now, the 20-year plan, you know, and we were gonna explode to 8,000 people. I think possibly that might be when they expanded the commercial. You'd have to look at the dates, but that might be coinciding, you know, that we're gonna get a lot of people, so we're gonna need more, who knows? But I know people that have wanted to sell and they couldn't because it was a house and then it was zoned commercial and they had a hard time trying to sell the house. Yeah.
So the house was there before it was commercial?
I'm not sure. I know the house has been there a long time. That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure of the dates. So it'd be fun, well, not fun, but to see, yeah. When that commercial zones were all established.
And the only other lots that Arlene and I were kind of talking about including are up Business Highway 20. So we're here right now. Up Business Highway 20. There's a couple commercial lots here. You have the pizza and then the boatyard or shop that's here. And then across the street, it's currently a residential home there, but that's actually zoned commercial. And then across the street, there's a little, oddly enough, tiny little commercial lot that it'd be hard to build anything that's commercial on there. But we don't have to be contiguous with our overlay. So those are the only other ones which maybe make sense, or maybe it makes more sense to have those, talk to those property owners and have them individually go through a zone change process if that's what they wanted to go through.
Would make me wonder, is that where you were talking about the one that was across Burgess, right?
Yeah.
From Ritza Pizza, that,
Yeah.
which used to be Flores Miller.
Yeah, I think it had some,
Those people I think are selling. Didn't I see a sale sign in front of
think
it? Does that affect
I
them
think-
trying to do that?
no, because right now it's currently commercially zoned. I think that would be, I believe that one is a historic residential home with occupancy, so whoever moves into that could use that as a home moving forward.
That's the place where they stored the crab pots. That's the place you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and I know it used to be, that used to be a greenhouse, big greenhouse there.
Oh, okay.
Cause they had, well, they called it Miller
Okay.
Nursery or something.
Yeah, I just
don't know.
remember.
Yeah.
Just crab pots. Figured fishermen.
But if those ones, since they're far away, it may make more sense that those property owners, when they're ready, they could go through their own application and process to rezone. We haven't heard from them specifically. Across the street there, that little tiny commercial lot, the owner actually owns the residential one just to the south too, and had some ideas about developing and as residential, but we haven't heard from them in a long time now. But those are the only other ones kind of looking through our commercial lots that Arlene and I were kind of thinking might make sense, but if there's other ideas for commercial lots to do that overlay, we have the ability to kind of propose this boundary as it makes the most sense for Toledo, and you all are on the ground and kind of can.
So make it that it's standard and sensible.
That's where I need your help as planning commission members on the ground, kind of site verifying, and if staff has it right in terms of that boundary, or if we need to adjust that boundary at all.
I have a question. So I thought about this after the last meeting, and I just popped in my head right now. So we have standard residential and we have general residential. Why can't we have standard commercial and general? or something like that.
Instead of doing an overlay.
So the standard would be straight commercial and the other would be commercial
Flexible.
and or flexible.
Non-commercial and commercial, yeah, makes sense.
Or flexible.
Yeah.
Which way makes it easier?
In terms of a code update,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I guess, people trying to do, like you said there, that the Miller florist is now residents. What makes it easier for those people to be able to do what they need to do is if we were to have a commercial, general and standard, or does the overlay simplify things more on that?
it could be this essentially the same outcome. If we wrote. How we wrote that new commercial zone, we could make it have the same outcome. I think in terms of. Code updates, doing an overlay is easier in terms of the amount of changes we would need to make. A lot of cities have multiple commercial zones. We have multiple industrial zones. We have our light industrial and then our regular industrial zone. So those uses allowed kind of vary. Our lighter industrial typically are less intensive versus industrial. So that's why some cities have a C1 and a C2 zone. I think historically only in Toledo, being a smaller community, only had the one commercial zone. And they're not like most of it is commercials along Business Highway 20. So in terms of impact, there's no need I don't think, and Arlene could maybe speak to it more. I don't think there was a need to have a more intensive and less intensive commercial zone, since there's less overall commercial in town.
So it is easier for, as far as mapping and such, to use an overlay.
Mhm. The overlay would be an easier option. I think if we were doing a bigger update and reworking all of our zones, I think we could do a C1, C2, or standard general, whatever we wanted to call it.
That would be good.
For light commercial.
With the overlay.
In general, at a staff level, I'd say the only issues or challenges we run in with the commercial zone are people wanting to do residential in the commercial zone. Otherwise, for the most part, I would say our commercial zone captures a lot of your traditional commercial uses. And we don't have too many people coming in for conditional uses in the commercial zone, except for what we've seen with the multi-unit quadplexes or triplexes coming in. But I think there are some areas where we could probably tweak that zone a little bit to make it even more flexible, but I think overall it hasn't created any issues where we're preventing businesses from coming in based on kind of what staff's seen previously in terms of applications. What I can do is I can come back with a little more detail in this section. And a better fancier map and add details, so it looks kind of like the Main Street overlay, but it's specific to this commercial residential overlay. If there's no changes, I can keep the map boundary the same, and then we can look at those other two lots, adding them in as well. Because how the Main Street overlay does it, there's actually not a map that describes the streets that are in the overlay. So we can do something similar, plus have a map, so it's really clear which lots are included in the overlay. But this would overall making it more flexible, not more restrictive. You'd still have that opportunity to do any of those commercial uses, but now you're having additional opportunity for residential options in that portion of town.
CR zone.
How, would it be? If you were to list all the lots that were in that zone, like an index,
Yeah, that would be good.
I don't know if that would be more work, and then, you know, like if somebody, most people know what their lot number is, correct? I mean, or whatever goes along, it's,
Yeah.
you know, and then like, here's our little map. And then on the side here, just a list of all the,
Right.
not necessarily the streets, but just the lot numbers themselves. I don't know if that would help or not, and that might help with the two excess, the little lots up there,
Yeah, I think we could list
and then
The lot.
be kind of clear.
that's
Possibly.
that's a good idea, because the Main Street overlay, you do have to interpret that a little bit. Luckily, we have the map now, but
Yeah.
that's been interpreted, but we could list the lot numbers and then have the map as well. Any other questions on that section? The last area where we two more sections, but page 52, non-conforming lots. So this last month, we didn't really talk about too much. So I wanted to go through kind of the reasoning for these changes and so this is our non-conforming uses and structure section. So the proposal would be to actually have it as non-conforming uses, structures, and lots as well. And overall, and I'll go through each of these sections, but overall, we were trying to restructure it to where you had non-conforming uses together and then non-conforming structures together and then non-conforming lots in terms of the standards. The previous code, we jumped around a little bit. So in terms of interpretation, made it a little more challenging to kind of review the section. So here, kind of the new language for the purpose, this chapter acknowledges and deals with non-conforming structures, uses, and lots. The standards and regulations of this code embody the city's vision for the future development of the city. It is the intent of the code that non-conformances be allowed to continue, but with future development be brought into conformance with the standards and regulations. So repair and maintenance. So essentially this section is allowing you to continue to repair and maintain your home without restrictions. So in the case of currently how it is, but if you had a home in the commercial zone, that is a non-conforming use. But this allows you to repair and maintain that home over time. For non-conforming uses, so discontinuation of a use, if a non-conforming use is discontinued for more than a year or suspended by a conforming issue, the non-conforming use shall be not be resumed. Any subsequent use shall conform with the underlying zoning district. So essentially, if you had a non-conforming use, say you had a commercial business that was operating in a residential area that's been operating there since the 60s. That's a non-conforming use that's been there, but if it stops for more than a year, now you've lost the right to continue that use in the zone. But if it's continuing, you're fine in terms of the use. Expansion, this except for a single unit detached dwellings, the non-conforming use shall not be extended into a different or greater area of the lot. So here, this is making sure that if you have that non-conforming use, you're working within your existing building, so you're not expanding that non-conforming use. But single unit detached dwellings that are non-conforming uses may be enlarged as long as the dimensional requirements meet the setbacks of the RG zone. So say you had a commercial, say you had your single unit home in the commercial zone and you wanted to build an addition to it. This is allowing you to build that addition to the home, but you still need to meet setback requirements of the RG zone, which would be 5 feet on the sides and 5 feet on the rear.
But we don't have to go through the planning commission to get it approved, it just goes right through.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good question. These would be reviewed at staff level during the building permit process. And then ADUs, so accessory dwelling units, are allowed in conjunction with a pre-existing non-conforming single unit detached house. So you could build an ADU in your backyard with similar example to expanding, but this is an ADU that you'd be allowed to build, because we don't want to prevent that, because that's another housing option and opportunity. So that's the non-conforming uses section. For non-conforming structures, so restoration or reconstruction, if a non-conforming structure or use is destroyed by any cause, the structure may not be rebuilt. A Class B variance is necessary to repair or rebuild a significantly damaged non-conforming. This should actually just say structure, not use or structure. I will make that change. And this.
What's the purpose of that?
This section,
Why would you not let them rebuild?
so
Why would you not let them rebuild?
and this is actually matches our current language and process for the variance. For the purpose of that is you want to allow people to maintain their current use, but in the long term, you're slowly moving towards what that zone has outlined for the future use. So the goal, when we.
Let me understand that. Person has a place that's not conforming,
Mhm.
but they've been there for 10, 20 years or whatever. And they have a fire and burn down. How does that affect their insurance?
You're not gonna let them rebuild?
You're not gonna let them rebuild?
We would.
So how would the insurance pay?
Conditional use permit.
There is an option for the variance, and I believe that has to be applied for within a year. I think, off the top of my head, so there's still the option. So that if it's burned down, that you go through the process for the variance, and you would just need to get the variance within a year. And then build before that variance expires. So there's still the ability to go through the variance process, but overall with these non-conforming code sections are in every single city's code, but overall the goal is that you allow these non-conforming uses to continue, but over time, the city's, what's been designated on the zoning map is what the city, planning commission typically and city council adopted as what they want to see as the future.
All right.
Future
I
use.
understand that. I'm just thinking about the person. How it deals with that insurance wise.
Your insurance wants to pay for the building.
Yeah, insurance may not pay for it at all.
No, that's a really good question, and that's where we've had to write letters in the past for areas, especially kind of where we're trying to do this overlay. To say kind of the citing the section that a non-conforming use can continue, and then citing the section that in order to rebuild, you have to go through the variance process. And that's a letter that we've had to send to oftentimes, is it insurance?
Mortgage.
Lenders, yeah.
What?
To lenders in terms of as they're selling that home.
It's in the letter.
They ask for what's the process to rebuild if that does happen. And that's kind of a reason, part of the reasoning for creating the overlay that we're trying to create is that we want to make it more flexible, so it's easier in that area where it's historically been residential and likely will continue to mostly be residential. to create more flexibility so we don't run into issues like this moving forward. So that's a really good question because that's part of the reason why we're trying to do the overlay.
Can variances be extended the same way a conditional use can? If they can.
For up to one additional year, so you would.
Okay, so a person would have
You can.
2 years.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we would even, yeah, we would even do it where if, say you got your variance for a year, then needed to renew, if you had your building permit in prior to that expiration, we would allow you to move forward as long as you didn't let your building permit expire. If you let your building permit expire, then you've lost that right. So we're as flexible as we can be with the timing of that.
All right, thank you.
And then the next section, alteration of non-conforming structures. They may be altered or enlarged, provided that the addition or alteration is no more non-conforming than the existing structure. If the addition or alteration is within a required side or rear yard setback, then we need fire chief approval. So let's say you have a structure that's 3 feet from the side yard setback and not 5 feet. So if you wanted to extend that home back, your side yard setback is continuing to be 3 feet from that side yard. This is allowing for that to continue and be expanded. However, we'd have to have the fire chief take a look to make sure it's not creating any sort of fire hazard if the adjacent property building's too close or if there's any other issues there. Because the part of the reason why you have the 5-foot setback is for fire safety and separation. So it's kind of, we're being flexible there, because if that home is at 3 feet, it's always been at 3 feet. Since it was built, say in the 50s, and you want to expand, this is giving that flexibility as long as we're checking our bases with the fire department. And the non-conforming lot section, this is actually this would be a new section. But a vacant non-conforming lot of record, and that's the new definition, lot of record that we have. May be built upon future development shall meet the current development standards unless a variance is applied for. So if you have a vacant non-conforming lot, that's our current minimum of 5,000 square feet in the RG, but your lot's only 3,500 square feet. This is allowing you to still build on that lot, but you need to meet setbacks still. So you might have to build a smaller home, but this is making it really clear that you're allowed to build on that lot because it's a legal lot that just happens to be below our current standards. And then built on non-conforming lots, a structure on a non-conforming lot may be expanded or altered, provided those changes can meet all the setback and development standards. So if you already have a home on a non-conforming lot and you want to expand it, that's okay, as long as you're meeting setback standards. And that's everything for the non-conforming section. Any other questions? There were some good questions in that section.
I did have a question, but you answered it when you said 3,500, 35,000
Okay.
square feet. That makes sense why it's not conforming. I was like, how can a lot be?
Yeah, it's kind of a funky concept. There's a few around town where they're small lots that got created a long time ago where they're really small. But so
it'll be 10 feet wide and 20 feet tall,
yeah, you might
50 feet long.
might have to create a weird welding shape. And then the last little bit is page 57. So this is our conditional use chapter. And this is something we've talked about in the past, but one of the big issues we run into with conditional uses and building permit timelines is it takes sometimes longer than a year, so you're getting people coming in for a renewal. So if applicant's gone through the conditional use process, got approval. It's, right now, we allow for the 1 year plus the 1 year extension. This proposal would change it to 2 years initially. And then getting 1 additional year. So just changing 1 to 2 in subsection A. And then subsection B, adding conditional uses approved prior to this ordinance may apply for 1 additional year for a total of 3-year approval. So it's keeping initial, you have that 2 years initial, and you still have the opportunity for 1 year renewal, so it'd be a total of 3. And this new language is recognizing that some conditional uses might be out there that haven't been completed, but this is giving them the opportunity to apply for that 1 additional year, even though originally they were only able to apply for two total years. I think the last text. Any other questions? We have a couple other discussion items to, any other questions on the code? Code edits?
We're gonna talk about this with the meeting schedule.
Ernie, wants to talk about the time.
Yeah, so currently we have 6:30 meetings. We changed it from 6 for a summer schedule. The proposal would be to move to 6 o'clock for at least the winter, and then we could re-explore.
How many people does that create a hazard?
And that's a question for the planning commission members. If 6 o'clock doesn't work for anyone, we can keep it at 6:30.
Either way.
There's
6 is fine.
It's okay with me.
Yes, okay with me.
And we can always revisit the time. It used to be later even,
Used to be 7.
but sometimes it's 6:30. It's a little nicer, and 6 in the winter, but we can always revisit it if there becomes conflicts.
Did you need to talk about either of these documents?
That's a good point. Those basically with that, the table that you have there, that was in a table format outlining all the text edits we went through.
Okay,
And then the memo, a lot of that I kind of talked through as I was going through the,
I just wanted to, I know that they were moving on, but I wanted to make sure that in your section here for the residential code update that you had covered all the documents that you wanted to cover.
yeah.
I had one question, and I meant it, and I had my thing, I couldn't find it. At the very beginning, where it says general provisions and definitions, apartment house assembly plans. There's one for babysitting. And it
Oh,
says
yeah.
the provision of childcare to a child in its own home. I'm just wondering why that's there. Is it to differentiate it from a childcare facility? I mean, you don't need a license to be a babysitter.
Which definition?
It's on page 2. Right there, on the zoning. General provisions. 1704.
Oh,
Babies, I'm just wondering. I've never noticed it before.
Oh, right there.
Right there, yeah.
Does that mean you have to register as a baby?
I don't know. That's why I'm wondering why it's
You gotta
there.
be
You have to,
kidding.
Well,
You don't have to register to
This is-
babysit.
it's a definition
yeah, I'm
is
just
what,
wondering. I'm wondering if we could get rid of it, I guess.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
makes me nervous.
and,
Trying to get into people's lives.
Yeah.
well, I'm just wondering if it was back from when they didn't have childcare facilities.
No, that,
It just seems like an odd thing to have in there.
I agree, and currently something that's happening at the state level is, they're looking at childcare standards overall in
Right.
terms of flexibility, so something I think in the future we'll end up doing is updating our definitions on childcare facility and home but
Okay. Yeah, because
Yeah.
there is one over there on the next page. We have center and home. Which basically looks like it's another one of those things of numbers, how many kids are there or not there. That's why I was wondering about the babysitting. It
Yeah,
just,
I'm not-
I'm sorry, it just.
No, I agree with you. I
it just-
didn't notice that
It's a good
myself.
point.
I don't know if we need
Sounds
that.
like we're a little bit big families.
Righty?
Oh, there you go.
I'll look into that. 'Cause it
Okay,
might
thank
be-
you. It just seemed off.
Yeah, well.
I hate to have a camel in the teeth.
Yeah, it's just.
It all
Yeah.
refers to child.
They do take over.
Yeah, it's a bit, I
Thank
just
you
think
for
it's
bringing that up.
leftover.
I didn't see
I
it.
know, it's important.
It is important.
It is.
Okay, did anybody else have any other questions or comments in Justin's portion here? Ready to move on? And I know we just discussed the winter meeting. Do we need to vote on that or are we just gonna, just 6 o'clock works for everybody? We'll just do that next
Go back
time.
to six.
I think it might be good to do an official motion.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll motion
Okay,
second it.
Second it?
Are we gonna, the only thing would be, what do we mean by winter? Are we talking September? through-
I don't see a definition for winter.
I mean, or do we decide,
Yeah, but you do though.
yeah,
Is that when?
November.
November is when
Yeah,
he's like,
I see that.
I know, okay, and that's fine, I mean, if we wanna start it at a certain time.
November through,
Third.
oh.
November until we told you otherwise.
November until,
Till we
April?
decide differently.
Well, November until,
through April.
when did it, because for you, for the access, that was kind of for your work. Does it work for us to do
And I
this
think
until April?
Brian
Yeah,
also.
maybe
was
probably.
running
Oh, for
into-
Brian too,
Yeah.
okay,
6 o'clock is fine for me anytime. 6:30 is also good.
okay.
Yeah, 6:30 and something, May to November would be fine.
Okay.
But like October's
May to
deer
November.
season, so.
There you go.
Does somebody want to put that in there?
So there's a motion on the floor. Ricky, you already made a motion if somebody wants to amend.
I will amend the motion that the time shall be 6 o'clock from November through May of each
And
year.
then 6:30.
And then it's revert back to 6.
And the one who made the original motion could second the amendment.
And I second the amendment.
Okay.
Okay,
Amen.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we'll, starting November, right? We'll be meeting at 6 o'clock,
November meeting.
November meeting.
One more at 6:30 in October.
And speaking of meeting, Brian, I'm gonna be missing next meeting, I believe.
Uh-oh.
I think I'm gonna be in Arizona. My daughter is having her baby, so I'm gonna be in Arizona.
Some reason.
Yes. Yes, so just want to give everybody a heads up. I'll probably not be here. Because that meeting. The next thing we have on here is the Doll and Juno tour recap.
We put this on the agenda knowing that we had completed the tour by the time of the meeting. So if anyone wants to talk about highlights, it's kind of an open discussion for our members.
If we do another one, they need to give us better instructions for the radio things. But it was fun. I appreciated everybody's time and the people on their end too, taking the time out, because I know us going through was somewhat interruptive perhaps.
I thought it was very well done too. Learned a lot.
I thought it was sad.
Yeah, it was good.
Today.
Mhm. Yeah,
I missed it.
okay, I guess nobody else wants to make any comments on that. I guess we're moving on to staff comments.
I don't have anything else. Riley, do you have anything?
Okay, then moving on to commissioner comments. Anybody want to make a comment?
Yeah, I do.
Ricky.
Yeah, of course, problems.
No, that's fine.
No, we've been, my wife and I have been here for 4 years. And one of the things we noticed when we first got here, or we'd been here, COVID, of course, got in the middle, but we noticed that there doesn't appear to be anybody that's doing anything to develop Toledo.
Yeah.
It's dead. The Main Street is dead and a lot of buildings that need fixing. And I sat down and I wrote a list of things I thought we could do. But everybody needs money to do anything. And nobody's got money, so there we go. But I think we should form a little committee or something like that that says, let's look at all the things we could possibly do and what we can do to make it happen. So we get people coming in so we can make commercial Main Street work. Because no one wants to put a business on a main street that has about 3.5 dogs walking down.
Right.
You gotta have foot traffic. And anyway, that's my proposal, that I think we should think about how we can get together and go through some stuff, wild as it may be, and see what can be done.
Maybe that could be an assignment.
Maybe after this project is done, once we get, what is it, May or next year, the 2025, get this through.
Our visitor would like to speak.
Mr. Dyson, I would heartily invite you to come speak to the city council. That is actually one of our goals in our goal setting. We just went through that again. And that is one of our goals to revitalize Main Street. We would love more ideas. Please, please, please come to the city council meetings and bring your ideas with you.
Ask your mayor where the letter is that I sent to him with all the ideas. But you've got a good point. I will come to the city council and bend their ear for 5 minutes.
I enjoyed it. It was good.
Okay?
only get 3 minutes.
Any volunteers?
Right.
On the point of Main Street too, the city adopted an urban renewal district 2 years ago. Oh, I think.
It's 2 years old.
And that takes a little bit of time for that to kind of get going. But that, I think, one of the goals of that was Main Street redevelopment too. So I think and that is a way to have some money attached to some future development. I don't know the ins and outs of our urban renewal district, but that's kind of one tool that the council adopted that can be used for redevelopment purposes.
Okay, so what do I do
For
to make it work? To get something
Send your
going,
list again.
so think it's just in the hands of the city council?
You show up, you pester us, you email all of us the list again, or show up with it printed and hand it to each of us and get the ball going again. Once it's out there, we don't ignore it.
Okay, when's your next meeting?
Our next meeting is not next Wednesday, but the following.
I'll be there.
Great. Look forward to seeing you.
You know, that was today, in all the places we were, that was the one thing that came to mind a lot. Dahl had those. Were there 3 guys that said that they'd not been here very long? Well, I'm not saying, they didn't talk about that, because they were talking about their Juno project or whatever, but you had dolls. I don't know so much about the Juno project, but then when you talked to the people at the mill, you had those engineers. They hadn't been here for very long.
Mm.
And I had thought a couple times during the day-to-day, and I thought, I wonder where they found to live.
What they found, yeah, that would be a good.
Yeah, I wondered if did they find something in Toledo? Did they have to go to Newport? Did they have to go to
What are we-
Wilmette?
What are we gonna do about the expansion at GP?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't really know anything about that, and they didn't really talk about that
They're talking
today.
about 300 or
So,
400 extra people. Where are we gonna put them?
Yeah, where?
yeah, I don't know, because they didn't address that today at all.
Yeah, we haven't seen any official documents come in, so that's not,
Rumor is good.
yeah.
Anyway, I'll be there.
Okay,
Wonderful. Are we done?
any other commissioner comments? Okay, well, I guess it's 8 o'clock. We'll adjourn the meeting.